Hello and welcome to 15 Days of Festive Fear, and we are on day number 11. And I have two spooky stories for you today, and our first story today comes from Jolynn. You featured my story recently from the first house I lived in where two people had died. I've since moved several times since then, and we now live in a house in Indiana, in the country, built in 1950. I don't know the history of the house or anything, but I'd love to share a few interesting things that have happened since we moved in. I think the first experience was had by my 20-year-old daughter. She was sleeping in the living room in the recliner when she heard footsteps in the kitchen behind her. She called out, "Mom," to see if it was me. She didn't really think it would be me because she said the footsteps sounded like boots on the floor, and it was around 2 a.m. We have a basement, so it's pretty audible when someone walks around. After that, she just felt very uneasy, like she was being watched. She also resides in the attic room. Our house has one giant room upstairs where she lives while going to college. She says at night she will hear knocking on the wall nearest her bed. On the other side of that wall is a closet. One day she had to get something out of the back of the closet and someone had written "Spook House" in crayon on the wall. I'm assuming a previous owner, but that was an interesting thing to write in an interesting location. Then there's DQ. We call her DQ because we held a Ouija board session one night and asked if there were any spirits in the house. One acknowledged that she was a young female and spelled out D-U-Q-U-E when we asked her name. And apparently DQ likes to play with the lights. The first incident with the lights was when my daughter and her boyfriend were in the family room on the couch watching TV. All of a sudden they screamed, and I came running in there. They were staring at the ceiling fan light which was on. They said the light just came on all by itself. They had actually heard the pull chain come down when the light came on, and by the time I got in there the chain was still swinging. They were completely freaked out. A couple of weekends ago I had two friends of mine sleep over. We had a girls' night and were preparing to go to bed. My one friend decided she was going to sleep on the couch in that same family room. She called out to me and asked, "How do you turn these lights out?" and pointed to the sconce lights above the fireplace. I didn't remember turning them on, so I joked, "Probably the same place you turn them on." She said, "I didn't turn them on, they just came on, just now." My other friend and I were on the complete opposite side of the house, and there was only one switch to those lights on the other side of the fireplace. When I went to switch them off, the switch had been flipped up. There's no three-way second switch or anything, just the one. And the last incident is probably the spookiest of them all. I was home alone about a week ago. The house was super quiet, so I decided I was going to talk to DQ. I said out loud, "DQ, if you want, you're welcome to turn on a light. Any light." And I waited. Nothing happened. I thought nothing of it. I was just having fun anyway. About 20 minutes later, my daughter came home. She walked in the door and said, "Did DQ do that?" And I asked, "Do what?" And she walked over to a flashlight that was on the floor, which was turned on. I didn't even know the flashlight was there because it was out of my line of sight from where I was sitting. I just froze and said, "You are not going to believe this," and told her the story of me asking DQ to turn on a light if she wanted to. There's no way that flashlight had been left on earlier, because the house had been empty most of the day before I got home, and those batteries would have been long dead. The only other thing that happened was when I had asked DQ to move my grandson's little big wheel ride-on toy. I watched the toy, and while it did not roll at all, the handlebars slowly moved from a straight ahead position to the turning right position. While I suppose it could have just been the natural tendency of those toys to have the handlebars to one side, it's just odd that it chose the exact moment I asked DQ to move the toy to have it turn like that. But I don't feel scared or unsafe at all. I'm oftentimes alone late at night and will go into the basement to do laundry. It's not a finished basement with nice floors and a drywall. It's kind of what you might call a creepy basement with concrete walls and floor and two giant openings that go into a dark crawl space. But I go down there and fold laundry and never feel uneasy. So whoever is residing there with us must be okay with us. And I'm okay with them. Now listen here to me, right? If I move into a house and Spook House is written on the wall in the back of a closet, I am getting my little bindle and I'm leaving. I'm out that door. I'm like, family, if I had one, do you know what I mean? I'd be like, I'm sorry, I'm leaving, I'm not doing this. Oh, if you can hear jingling, it's because Hades is fighting a fish on the floor currently. So that's what that sound is in the background. He's very playful at the moment, so he's making a lot of noise. And I'm continuing to record regardless because listen, all right, that's just what happens when you record in your house. And while obviously like it's deeply unpleasant to kind of feel like there is something in your house, etc., I do also think, Jolynn, that fundamentally it does sound like whatever is in your house is something that is just letting you know that it's there, in terms of the lights coming on and off, and in terms of little knocks and somebody walking around. Like that's kind of generally manageable. I always find lights turning on and off interesting in terms of those instances where the switch isn't flipped, if you know what I mean. So if the light comes on electricity wise but not switch wise, what does that say for the power of spirits? Because I just think it's a really interesting point to note that you know, your friend was like, oh, who turned on the fireplace or the sconces in the fireplace and the switch isn't on, you know? I find that really fascinating because it's that to me indicates like energy, like a power and energy that is paranormal, which is quite cool to really think about. And I think that if it was a case where in this house there was something that was malevolent or creepy or whatever, surely it would be in that basement where there's concrete floors and two giant openings that go into a dark crawl space. That's where you'd find it. But if you're down there happily doing your laundry and the queue isn't bothering you, I'm pretty okay with that kind of haunting, to be honest. And our second story today comes from Maisie-Rose. On October the 31st, 2023, my boyfriend and I and our German Shepherd Nero relocated to Shrewsbury in the UK, the home of Charles Darwin, by the way. We moved into a semi-rural cottage, which is part of a multi-cottage estate, which are scattered about 1 to 4 miles of each other. Our cottage is the only one on its own, not attached. No neighbours. Perfect. Utter sanctuary. My boyfriend Luke, of 9 years, works from home, self-employed as a currency trader and educator in the field. He has a chalet outside in our garden, equipped with the facilities he needs, so he very rarely comes into the house during the day. I work at a vet's in the next town over. The first 18 months of living in our cottage was beautiful. Out of all the places we have lived, this is by far our favourite. Our friends are amazing, and we love our jobs, and our home is the homiest it's ever felt. It's too bad that we rent, because I would love to buy. When we moved into the cottage, it wasn't in bad shape at all. A little dated here and there, but just needed some TLC, so that's what we did. We painted, we laid down some new flooring and fixed up the fireplace to get it functioning. The garden was the awful task. I myself am not green-fingered at all. In fact, I do not have the patience for gardening. At this time, we had no unwanted visitors or anything happening until the present day. It was around 3:30ish a.m. in late September. It's dark outside. I could hear the faint sound of cars going past and the slight howl of the wind through the thick oak tree in our garden. Little creaks of the house settling and the little trickling of water coming from the fish tank. Nothing out of the ordinary. Our dog Nero came up to me, sticking his wet nose in my face, pleading at me to let him out for the bathroom. This wasn't unusual for him to do. I got up, grabbed my robe, grabbed my phone for a flashlight, as Luke needed to sleep in the pitch black, so no nightlight. I made it to the landing and I switched on the big light, which gave me enough brightness to see and get downstairs, to put on the downstairs light and the outside floodlights for Nero. I let Nero outside to do his business, and I knew at this time I wasn't falling back asleep, so leaving the back door open, I went and put the kettle on. While the kettle was brewing, I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth, because it's the first thing I have to do. As I proceeded to walk out of my bathroom, mid-tying my robe around me, I first saw his feet. At the end of our long hallway, standing in front of the open back door. I knew he was looking at me. I was still. My blood was ice cold. My face was tingling like I was going to pass out. Without looking at him directly, I tried to pretend I hadn't seen him. A gentleman in his mid-50s or early 60s, combed back hair, slacks and a button-up top. Smart shoes. That's what I kept reminding myself for when I had to report my intruder to the police, because the first thing that came to mind was I was being burgled. I bolted upstairs to wake Luke and tell him, and he shot up like the Undertaker from WWE. He ran downstairs looking for our intruder. Meanwhile, I'm shouting for Nero. In strolls Nero like it was the most mundane morning of his life. He went for the toilet, did a lap of the garden. Sweet, where's my bed? Which made us more confused, because Nero is not a people person. Nero is my protection dog. Luke works away a lot and travels with his business partner, so that leaves me on my own. That's why we got Nero from a company that specialises in this. And Nero didn't make a sound. When he came in, there was no aggressive sniffing to identify the intruder or no barking. Just wondering why Dad was stood in the hall in his jocks and Mum looking frantic. We do have CCTV due to Luke working from home, and we logged onto the system and saw nothing. No one coming in, no one coming out, just the lights coming on and Nero doing a big stretch and plodding off into the field. A few days later, we haven't heard or seen him in the meantime. But we lost our darling Russian dwarf hamster, Pumpkin, due to a mean battle with an abscess that just wouldn't get better. I was devastated. I had my girl for 18 months. And that night I prayed to God to give me a sign that she crossed the Rainbow Bridge okay. I am very religious, but don't follow most traditions of Christianity. I am heavily tattooed with black and white Narcissa Malfoy hair and do occasionally love the odd sin. But it brings me peace, and I have always been this way. I have these floating Harry Potter style candles in my room that require you to twist them in order to make them flicker, no switches. I had unturned these as sometimes the flicker can be a bit annoying. I was in bed reading when suddenly one of the candles started flickering. I couldn't believe it. I knew it was Pumpkin saying that she had crossed the Rainbow Bridge. The past 2 weeks, this one particular floating light comes on in the evening when I'm in bed and will be off by the time I'm awake. Very strange, but it doesn't make me feel uneasy. Luke's dad came to visit last week. In the evening, when we were sat down for dinner, he said to me, "You guys must be made of bleeding money." I asked him what he meant. He said he came downstairs that morning and that we'd left the bathroom tap running. The heating had been turned on, the downstairs light was on, and the floodlight was on outside. Me and Luke looked at one another across the table over the candlelight, and we both went white. Luke's family call him Mr. Krabs due to him being so tight with money. But I live here free of costs thanks to Luke and his hard work, so with Luke paying the bills, I don't take the piss with leaving electronics on or the heating on, etc. So at this point, me and Luke knew this was our visitor. Our visitor doesn't feel cruel or evil. He seems like a friendly, almost like annoying brother type. As of last night, I've had enough of our troublemaker ghost. I woke up and he had turned on all the lights in the bedroom, making it seem like it was 1 p.m. on a summer's day. Not bleeding impressed. If you know me, you'll know don't ever wake me up. Ever. Let me wake up on my own. And finally, don't ever turn on any lights when I'm trying to sleep. Let me bed rot in the pitch black. So in tiredness and frustration, I shouted, "Right, you can stay, but I don't see you, and stop fucking with the lights and pissing around." Luke looked at me like I lost the plot. I got up, turned off all the lights and went back to a fitful sleep. Now that I have acknowledged him, will he carry on or will he leave the house alone? I'm not sure what to do. Someone said sage, but I'm more religious than witchy. But I'm not sure what to do if it doesn't stop. I hope you and the amazing community of listeners can help, otherwise I'll be living like Charles Bleeding Dickens with no electricity next, just so my ghost can stop meddling. Let me tell you, Maisie-Rose, when I was reading the bit where you are standing, realising there is a man who is not your partner standing at the end of the corridor I tell you, I would have shit myself then and there. I would have simply dissipated into the air, because my first thought would also be, oh my God, there is a man in the house. I'm being burgled. Somebody's broken in, and I would shit myself. And good on you for repeating what he looked like in your brain so that you could tell the police later. Man, how do people think about these kind of things when they're in a crisis? Because I am just doing stupid shit. That's all I'm doing. Although in saying that, it would make me feel better if the dog was like, yeah, morning. Why is everyone freaking out? What's going on? And because, you know, we know that animals are detectors of anything bad that enters into your life, right? So we know that animals know. They just know. They know. They always know. They can sense things around the house. They know when things are bad. However, this is also something that we need to add to the kind of life after death handbook for ghosts, etc. We always talk about how no touching, consent is really important even in the afterlife. But equally, stop turning shit on. Like, it is a cost of living crisis. I don't want to be paying mad electricity bills just because you're looking for attention. I don't want to be paying mad water bills just because you're looking for attention. That's crazy. There are other ways to communicate and get attention. Leave a smell around the house, like lavender or even cigarette smoke, you know? Leave a feather on a windowsill or a nice coin somewhere where they can find it. Yeah, just stop making life difficult for the living. Things are shit enough on this side, you know? And maybe some direct communication is exactly what was needed. You know, just to like, right, you can stay, but stop with the lights, stop mucking around in my house. It's very annoying and it's very expensive. But I do love the fact that your little hamster that passed away was able to come back and give you a sign and let you know that she was okay. Because it's always hard when pets go, and we want to know that they're okay and that they've crossed over the rainbow bridge and that they're happy doing whatever it is they loved doing in life on the other side. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Jolynn and Maisie-Rose for sending in your stories. Remember, if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories. Where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you can get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.